Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Lee. I'm co-president of the New York Student Mental Health Organization, also known as NYSMHO, and I'm a current junior at Bard High School, Early College, Queens.
Hi everyone, my name is Tahsin and I'm the current head of communications at NYSMHO. I'm also a current senior at Broad High School Early College Queens.
So today we're excited to have licensed clinical social worker Elana Katz here with us to talk about varying mental health issues that are prevalent in today's youth, specifically about exploring individuality and its impact on family dynamics. Elana, if you don't mind, I'm just going to quickly introduce you. Elana is a senior faculty member at the Ackerman Institute for the Family, where she teaches advanced family therapy and has directed the Family and Divorce Mediation Program for 20 years. She is also one of the first therapists in New York to become certified in emotionally focused therapy and is currently one of the 60 trainers in emotionally focused therapy worldwide. She's published a number of articles and has been quoted by the New York Times, the Associated Press, and other media outlets, including National Public Radio. She currently serves on the executive board of the New York Center for Emotionally Focused Therapy and runs her private practice in Manhattan. So welcome, Elana. It's so good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us. So if you don't mind, I think we can jump right into their first question.
Absolutely.
So Elana, I know you've had many prior experiences working with different families. And so we'd first like to ask you, what is it like to grow up as a teenager and also have this pressure to maintain a healthy family life? How does seeking to establish one sense of individuality impact their family dynamics?
So first of all, I think it's really nice that you guys are asking that question because I think many parents might think that teens don't think at all about what the impact is on the rest of the family, right? It's sort of like you kind of wake up one day and your kid has become this other kind of person who lives for their friendships, their interests, wants to be out a lot, right? And, you know, I think some parents wind up feeling a little bit like confused and lost and, you know, where did my child go, right? Kind of feeling. And it's really kind of neat to think that, you know, even though parents might not hear it, that actually I hear it because I'm a therapist, that kids are also thinking about what's happening to everybody else, whether it's the adults in the household, whether it be kind of a traditional two-parent household, single parent, multi-generational, or having other siblings at home. I think there's an awareness that, yes, the horizons are broadening. Schoolwork can be incredibly intense. Interests outside of home become really compelling, I think. That's my experience. And I think the family behind can feel a little forgotten. So to think about how do I sort of let my family know that I still think about them, I'm still a part of things here, but my horizons are getting bigger is a big challenge. And I think it's, you know, I always say I was never a drummer or a soccer player, but my understanding is that to do either one, your right foot and your left foot have to do two different things, you know? So I think it's a little bit like that. Like, I do want to have my life out there. Thank you so much. You know, I worked hard to get to this point. And I know you guys are going to miss me, you know, even if there've been a lot of complaints, even if you think I am too loud at the table, I leave my stuff everywhere. I know it, you know, that's one thing about a family. When somebody shifts, everybody shifts, right?
I definitely agree with that. And I can also like resonate with what you said about it sort of feeling like a dramatic shift. Like I notice sometimes like my parents will also reflect back on who I was as a child and notice that there's like a very drastic difference between who I was when I was younger and who I am today. And so I feel like sometimes I can also like see from my own experiences that it can be hard to notice that change and like to accept that change. And also for me, even when I see my parents change a bit from who they were in the past, it's like I notice that I myself am also changing. And so I think that flexibility is really important.
I love the word you chose, Tahsin, because I think flexibility and resilience go together a lot, right? That's really what as a therapist I'm hoping for so often, whether I'm working with a teen or a family. It's can we have some flexibility? Because oftentimes what happens is in conflict is, you know, people seem to say and do the same thing over and over again, only louder, right? So we're trying to build in some flexibility where things get stuck.
Definitely. And like I think another thing is that it can't just be like one-sided, like it can't just be like one individual being flexible, but like everyone has to be flexible because otherwise it won't work out.
And I think that's where you start to get into the different styles and the different culture and the different patterns of different families, right? So some families that are more rigid and a little more traditional that may think that children need to be beholding to their parents, right, may not as easily bring that flexibility to their children, right? And on the other side, you can have parents that so badly want to be just their kids' friends that sometimes you sort of can't find you need somebody to lean on. Sometimes you do need somebody who's going to set the frame and put some boundaries. And so it's also paying attention to the fact that not every family has the same climate in terms of finding that flexibility.
Yeah, I like how you pointed out that on both sides, there's sort of this middle ground on how you have to adapt, like while growing up, to both the parent side as well as like the child side or the teen side in this case. And I think it's important that like both sides sort of recognize that and like reconcile with the fact that there are going to be these changes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that has to be something that is bad or has to negatively impact them to an extent where their like mental well-being is sort of like put at stake.
Right. I think the toughest is when people try to act as if there isn't going to be a change. Like, can't everybody just get back in their box, and just like be what we were? And that's not going to work very well, right? Or else somebody's going to have to just be faking it all the time, which is really not healthy, right? So sometimes I think about what makes it possible, that why in some families does that expectation of change come more easily than others? And, I think sometimes it can depend on other stressors that have nothing to do with the teen, but just impact the teen. Like, is the family really challenged economically? So all of a sudden you have a teen who wants to, I know one family I spoke with, their son was really excited that he reached a certain age and his school allowed them to go out at lunch, and he wanted to go out and buy lunch with his friends. And you know what, there just wasn't money to go out and buy lunch with, on a regular basis, right? So there was economic pressure that was colliding with this kid. This kid was so happy to get to that point. He was older than his siblings. He was ready to go out and do this stuff. He had friends. The economics were not on that side, right? And for others, I think sometimes only children, not always, but sometimes will carry more responsibility for sort of the emotional life of the family. If you're becoming a teen and you've got 3 younger siblings and your family's sort of really busy, sort of moving down the road, it's not probably going to carry quite as much weight as if the family is kind of organized around you. And then all of a sudden you're saying, well, I don't want to be, how late can I stay out Friday? How late can I stay out Saturday? Sunday I've got this or that, and it's kind of like, what is this whole vacuum, right? Like, where are you? And what's happened to our whole family? Which you don't feel quite the same way, I think, in a larger family. Does that make sense?
Definitely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like more in like building on like the whole point of individuality, I think as we grow older, we kind of go on our own different ways. Like, I think when we are younger as a family, like I've noticed that we tend to stick together much more. But as you grow up, when you start to go outside a lot more, hang out with friends or engage in activities outside of home and things like that, it starts to consume time. And that feeling of like sitting together at a dining table, for example, to eat dinner, like that doesn't always happen anymore. And so like that feeling of togetherness as a family begins to shift.
Yeah. And I think that if families can manage it, you find other ways to feel connected. Like, one way is to try to keep your kid just like, you just keep being who you were. And the other is to say, okay, I get it. You want to go out with your friends on Saturday night. I hear you. Well, can we have breakfast together? I mean, maybe breakfast won't be till noon, but could we have breakfast together on Sunday morning? If we're not going to have dinner together as a family, can we have breakfast together? what can we substitute? How can we be flexible with each other so we still feel connected? We want to know what's going on. We want to know what you're excited about, what you're worried about, but we don't want to clamp you down and not give you a chance to be with your friends, right?
On that note of like sort of having to connect with your family and find that like middle ground, I was wondering, with the rising emotions that come from more independence and those rising tensions, possibly with other family members, how can one go about managing and alleviating their feelings?
So that's one of the things I wish I had, something really magical to say at this moment. Because one thing that may surprise everybody, the teen, the siblings, the parents, is just how all of a sudden big the emotional life can be, right? Like sometimes I think it surprises even the person themselves when their emotions come out so strong and intense, and they may not feel like themselves anymore, right? So, and that has, that's part of the change and the growth, and sometimes it can be overwhelming, right? Not just to the parents, but also to the person themselves, right? So if I had one wish, if I could only have one wish from this conversation, I would say, that kind of intense emotions that feels like it's never going to shift, or you're just so mad, or you're so distressed, or you're just like, like it will shift, it won't stay at that intense place. Taking a deep breath is a really good thing. Taking a few deep breaths is probably a better thing. And sometimes also feeling like, can I kind of figure out what are my big emotions trying to say? Like, what is so frustrating? What is so overwhelming right now? What is so essential right now? Like, sometimes it's very frustrating to think, oh, my parent or parents or my grandmother doesn't understand me right now. But sometimes I think it's also hard. Maybe I don't understand myself right in this now. So just trying to sort of connect with, what am I really trying to say? What's like really underneath this? Taking a few deep breaths. And the other thing is to try not to be alone with that distress, because one of the things we've learned, and I am a card carrying EFT therapist, so I'm really leaning towards, it's a model that really is based on the idea that we're all mammals and we're not wired to sort of manage our distress alone. So who can be on your team? Like, who is going to help you co-regulate? Because you're going to find your emotional balance much faster with a good friend than if you try to stay in that emotional soup all night by yourself. So if you can talk to your family, fantastic. If you can't talk to them and you need to find your balance by talking to a good friend, that's awesome. But it's harder to do it all by yourself. That's for sure. And is it amazing, like when you look back and you say, I was so mad, I was so frustrated, or I was so scared. And then, I spoke to my friend and, and it was, okay. So it was annoying, or it was irritating, but it doesn't feel insurmountable, right? It changes.
Yeah, I definitely also personally relate to that as well. Like, I feel like even if there is something where I feel like my friends maybe haven't been in the same exact situation, like they haven't exactly been in the circumstance I'm in, even just being able to rant to them or just vent out my feelings, I feel like there's like a burden that lifts off of my chest. And it's just, even if they can't change the situation for me, especially in our current like world, at least I know that like I'm being heard and that I'm not in this alone.
Right. There's something about really, yes, being heard and somebody saying, I get it, you make sense, I understand why this would bother you, that can really just literally calm the nervous system.
Definitely. And I think one other thing actually that I think is really important here is that I feel like sometimes people are afraid to reach out to their friends or another adult or anyone like that, because there can sometimes be like a stigma that it's like it's negative if you ask someone else for help. Like, you should be able to fight through this alone, and if you're not, you're weak or something. And I think it's really important that people understand that you're not weak for interacting with others and asking for help through your emotions, because we're humans, and like you said, we're social beings because we're mammals. So I think that's really important for people to
Yeah, I mean, you're singing out of my songbook, but yeah, like we really do miss. Look, I'm from the Midwest originally, and grew up at a time where the whole idea of mental health was like, how could you be as independent as possible? And things changed in the course of my career, and from when I grew up. And now it's not, the goal is not to be as independent and as alone as possible. The idea is to be interdependent in a healthy way, where we really do rely on each other and learn how to do that in a way that's effective, that doesn't overwhelm anybody, but doesn't leave anybody, alone.
So I think that along the lines of overcoming struggles, I think that in our current moment right now, obviously there's a pandemic going on with COVID-19, our emotions and our feelings and our relationships with others have been displaced a lot. And so on that note, I think that there has been a lot of an emotional burden on every one of us. And it has also left many teenagers looking for ways to cope with their emotions in their home environment. And so I was wondering, what are some of the challenges you believe students are facing in their family and social life as they battle the effects of COVID-19? And are there any opportunities or coping mechanisms that you believe teenagers are possibly overlooking?
So what a great question, and what an unprecedented time. I know that when I was asked to clear out my office and we were told that we were closing the office, I thought, this was mid-March, I thought I'd be home for 2 weeks. I'm still home, I'm still doing all my work from this room and this computer, So this has gone on an insanely long time, and we're not done. And I know that people have been zigzagging in and out of their schools. And so I think one of the challenges is just what probably feels like a really unfair choice either way you turn, right? Like on the one hand, if you really listen and you're really careful and you're not socializing in groups and you're not being inside with people who are not, careful, so you're left with being outside in masks, or I guess in school in masks, and there's so much restriction. So I think many teens, especially because this was the age you're supposed to have your freedom. You're supposed to be able to go around by yourself, do what you want, you hang out longer. Hey, mom, hey, dad, I'll be home. I'll be home after 7. I'll be home after 8. I'll be home after 10, right? And all that is changed. And if you decide to fly in the face of that and say, I'm not going to listen to all the concerns about COVID, I'm just going to go anyway. We're going to find a way to hang out. We'll be in a big group. Who cares? Then you're really risking health, your own health, bringing stuff home to your family. So what a nasty dilemma to be in. Either I'm really restricting myself and not getting to do nearly as much as I was really looking forward to doing right now, or I'm jeopardizing everybody's well-being. So that is incredibly tough, and it isn't fair. And talk about prices that people are paying. So like some people didn't get graduations even, right? They worked so hard through school. They really look forward to that. Maybe it's corny and they say, no, who cares? But people do, I think, sometimes care, and they want to go through that ceremony with their friends, and it wasn't possible in many places, right? So there've been lots of having to get used to not having the usual and customary, right? And finding alternatives. How can I connect with my friends? What can we do? What is and the other thing I will say though, and this kind of surprised me, is that I noticed in the number of months after people were more restricted, that I started to get more calls for family therapy. People were saying, usually my teens are so overscheduled that I could never imagine us doing therapy as a family. Like there would just be no way to find even 1 hour in the week when we could all be in a conversation at any kind of civilized hour. And now, because so many things were cut back or cut out, people are saying, let's work on these relationships. Let's get along better. Because sometimes people just get stuck. It's not, I don't think it's that they don't really want to get along with their family, but sometimes it's like, well, I'm more like one parent than the other. If you're in a two-parent household, this parent seems to understand me more, and excuse me. And people get stuck in a pattern, and some parents are very sad about it. They say, my teen doesn't relate to me at all. It's been years. And it was pretty amazing to see families turn those situations around, where the fact that there was more family time available, that they could do some therapy together, in a number of cases, didn't even take especially long to start to build some bridges and some renewed connections in the family. Then that, I will say, that was one silver lining from the COVID shutdown.
Yeah, I think that it's a fortunate thing that I think that even though it's really frustrating to see like all of your events and programs, some people were in activities that they were looking forward to for a long time, only to see them get canceled. And I think that entire experience is frustrating, but it is nice to see that there are some positive things. Like, we can be optimistic and look for how to use a little bit more free time that we now have in order to develop our relationships in our families at home. I do think one thing though is that I also do notice that sometimes in my own experiences and in my friends' experiences, sometimes there can be a bit more of conflicts within the family itself, because kind of like being stuck together all day at home, I think that sometimes it does give more room for arguments and things along those lines to happen. So I do feel like there's both the benefit of like more time to devote to building family, but also like the conflict of like we're stuck together. So like the conflict is bound to happen.
There was one video that went around pretty early into the pandemic. And it was a mom, like, just kind of screaming at the camera. She says, I've got 4 kids and I've got 2 computers. They fight all day long about like who gets the computer and who doesn't get the computer. The teachers are always checking in, like, how are they doing? How is my, and then she says, who's asking how I'm doing? And then the kids ask me for help on this or that subject. I don't know these things. Now all of a sudden they realize how stupid I am and I don't know this or that. And she was just going on. And it was funny, and it was also not funny. It was sad. And I do think in general, people are their nerves are getting frayed. Like, I was in this, I still do some in-person grocery shopping. And I could just feel it over the weekend that as we're getting ready to shut down a little bit more, it feels like, and the numbers are getting worse again, unfortunately. The tension just in the supermarket was, you could cut it with a knife, people just stocking up on everything and, fighting for, getting into certain aisles. It was just really terrible. So, and I think there is a tendency to think, if anything, like, our families are stuck with us. So even if I do hold it together all day long with online school or errands I've got to do or whatever else it might be, maybe I can let it all out when I get home, because after all, it's my family, right? And I think I think that's very human and very understandable. And also we need some compassion for each other to say, yeah, it is super hard. And we're all trying, and we got to have hopefully a little bit of understanding and compassion for ourselves and each other.
Yeah, I think we do have to recognize, like, on all sides, there are a lot of different barriers that people are facing in terms of like understanding their relationships to their children, or even like teens understanding the relationship to like their own parents, and how you can sort of like turn to each other and be able to resolve that together. I mean, on that note, I think that's all the questions that we had. Thank you so much, Elana, for coming to speak with us.
It's my pleasure. It's really my pleasure. You guys were so interesting for me to talk to. I wish you lots of good luck with your programs and getting the word out about all the things that you're covering, which are so essential.